Oh, all right, fantastic. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to take a minute to welcome everyone to April's From the Bench. I'm really excited to have our guest today, Mita Mahato. And I am going to just do a tiny bit of housekeeping here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Jenny Hinchcliffe. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Artist Programs here at San Francisco Center for the Book. It's great to see you all online, and this is our monthly program From the Bench. I will say that you are welcome to type your questions into the chat as we go along, and Mita will be happy to answer your questions in real time. So just feel free to type in, and we'll ask along as the event progresses. So a little bit about Mita. Mita Mahato is a comics artist and poet who assembles her panels and pages with cut and collaged papers in poetic experiments that dramatize entangled processes of death and renewal, specifically within the context of ecosystemic loss under capitalism. Her new book, Arctic Play, is published by The Third Thing, and her poetry comics have appeared in places including PRISM, Ecotone, Iterant, Shenandoah, ANMLY, and Drunken Boat, as well as on tables at comics and zine festivals in handmade DIY forms. Her book TROPSSAP is part of the exhibition that will be opening here at SFCB on April 19th. The exhibition is called Crossing the Line, The Passport Reimagined. And I'm excited to hear more about Mita's work, and I'm excited to share it with all of you. So I'll go ahead and hand things off. All right, Mita, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And also thank you to Sarah Songer and to SFCB for inviting me. I'm really honored to be part of this series, and it's so nice to see some familiar faces here. So thank you all for being here as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. Let's see, play. There we go. So I wanted to frame this talk today by thinking about how considerations of place are sewn into my practice. For the first part of the talk, I will give an overview of my work, and then I'll shift gears and talk more closely about two of my most recent unrelated projects, Arctic Play and TROPSSAP. So I think of my work as an opportunity to affirm a sense of place as more than location or something that needs to be controlled or used, to see place as a series of systems of relations and entanglements. As such, I work in hybrid forms, bringing together comics, collage, different poetic structures, as well as using different materials and techniques to shape the images and the words that end up in my work. I tend to work with found materials, newsprint, tissues, maps, lately with plastics. What you're seeing on this page, these are all tissues, taking up materials that are considered waste or useless and giving them continuing contexts for meaning and meaning making. I love bringing poetic strategies into comics and vice versa because the two forms do work in such similar ways through adjacency and assemblage. For poetry, it's usually about bringing words into relation with each other in surprising or unusual ways to encourage readers to see something in a way maybe that they haven't before, maybe just to the side of usual perception. And for comics, sometimes it's multiple forms of signification, word and image, or different kinds of images side by side. And so putting these modes together, poetry and comics, becomes a way for me to really play with possibility and to open the brain to think outside of convention and to invite surprise and wonder. Because so much of my work is about climate-related issues, loss of habitat or failures in food supply chains, species extinction, working in hybrid forms, so not only settling into one straightforward way of doing things, but working across ways, gives me a way to acknowledge that these are systemic and entangled issues. Entanglement of Place is at the heart of Arctic Play, was published last October by the Third Thing Press. Arctic Play is a long form and experimental book. It's part comic book, part poetry collection, part drama, and part expedition log. And it takes as its starting point an artist residency in the Norwegian Arctic of Svalbard that I was part of in 2017. And contrary to what I think most people think when I tell them that I did this residency, and also what I thought going into it, I did not find the journey inspiring, at least not at first. In fact, the experience of being there met me with a lot of creative blockage. And a lot of that had to do with being in a place that confronted me with my own bad habits born out of capitalism that are part of the climate crisis. So the big one being, why did I need to go to the Arctic to make a book about climate change? And granted, this was 2017 when the discourse was still largely about polar ice caps, but it did confront me with this question of how we not just represent, but make or perceive place in our writing and in our art. And so the book that emerged over the last several years is this attempt not to capture or objectify place, but to be in conversation with it and to be in the context of the relationships that it holds, which includes, my own faulty relationship with it. And the book thinks less in terms of solution and more in terms of situation. So that is to say that I wanted to situate more harmful discourses and practices related to travel, tourism, art making, scientific practices within the much larger entangled systems of life that they're part of. The book is made up of 3 different acts, each with a different visual style and approach. And I'll share a few pages from each of the 3 acts and talk through them a little bit. So Act 1 is made of a series of diagram poems about Arctic encounters that trace the grid lines of woven paper. I was stuck for quite a long time, actually, on what the visuals for this act would look like. I had this series of list poems, and I kind of had to really think through what they would look like. And one challenge for me was that I didn't want to represent the subjects of these encounters in a realistic way. I wanted to create something in which the image that readers would get in their minds wouldn't be of an isolated subject, but would be more an experience of the system of relationships that subject is part of. So again, place isn't just about location, but the relations that are entangled that really make up the place. And I landed on these woven papers to embody interconnection, things hidden, things always emerging, many pathways. Um, I'll read this one to you. This one is about the sky. The sky is always, the sky is everywhere. The sky is white, gray, blue, pink, yellow, orange, purple, black. The sky is flashing green. The sky is hazy. The sky is thick with fog, thick with snow. The sky is above the ship, above the sea. The sky is beyond the mountains, quiet as the mountains. The sky is loud with helicopters, loud with gulls. The sky is holding the sun, holding the moon, holding stars, holding clouds rolling over and over upon themselves. The sky is always everywhere, flashing, hazy, thick with, beyond, quiet as, loud with, holding. The sky is white, gray, blue, pink, yellow, orange, purple, black, green. The sky is fog, snow. The sky is the ship. The sky is the sea. The sky is the mountains, helicopters, gulls, the sun, the moon, stars. The sky is clouds rolling over and over upon themselves. Okay. So Act 2 of Arctic Play is made up of scenes of dialogue that I was part of or that I overheard while I was in the Arctic that all focus on confrontations with weird or unfamiliar objects or events. I kept noticing this compulsion we had to describe something unfamiliar with something known. So for instance, we would hear these glaciers calving. And our response would be something like, oh, it sounds like thunder, or it sounds like gunshots. And I started to think about, as I was hearing kind of our responses, about how we use metaphor almost as a kind of safety net when confronted with the unfamiliar. My brain was making sense of the tremendous sound of a glacier calving by imposing language on it that was familiar to me. And of course, then you're just making things over with what you already know, right? So in this act, I wanted to grapple with that compulsion by thinking in part about metaphor as hallucination. The idea then is not to fight the urge to find likeness, but to think through what it might mean to believe that two objects are the same thing. Can that expose or make transparent some actual connection? Um, and yeah, so I'll just read this scene. This is scene 1 from Act 2. Today we walk along the shoreline, collecting plastics thrown up by the waves. We drag along an 80-gallon bag in which we gather the sea's trash. I find bottles in cafeteria trays. I find PVC pipes and fishing nets. I find a pen. I find strips of plastic sheeting. That isn't plastic, it's kelp. It's kelp? It's kelp that looks like plastic. Oh. I fish the kelp from the garbage bag and place it back upon the shore. And just a few words about the materials I'm using here. The backgrounds are handmade papers that I got the pulp from blending up old newsprint. And I embedded them with these plastic scraps from my grocery store shopping. And when I scanned the pages, I was just so taken by how much the scanned plastic resembled glacial ice. And so there's kind of a play with hallucination in the materials I'm using too. Okay. So the final act, Act 3 of Arctic Play, is a visual sonnet to a polar bear. And I'll just share this image as a teaser. I wanted to use the sonnet form to wrestle with what it means to love and care for another species in ways that are non-extractive and in ways that may not be or likely are not reciprocated. And the sonnet is made up of 14 facing pages, that is 14 spreads to echo the form of word-based sonnets. The pages on the left have more of a drawn style with some cut paper elements, and then the pages on the right are a tangle of cut papers, tissues, and newsprint. And there are echoing elements between the two. I wanted to invite the eyes of readers to dance across the page as a way to encourage slow thinking about desire and longing in the face of catastrophic loss. So during the final stages of editing Arctic Play for publication, I received an email from Catherine McCallis at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art inviting me to contribute new work to the book arts exhibition Crossing the Line, The Passport Reimagined. And as someone whose creative practice is really rooted in zine and handmade book cultures, I was really excited for the opportunity to make a book from conception to binding again. And with that, I also didn't want to make a singular book object, but to also have a copied printed version that could be shared and touched and also intervened upon by someone else's hands. I had been playing with risograph printing more and more and decided on Riso for the printed version of the book. Um, and in part because Arctic Play was so fresh in my mind, and also as a longtime educator, I began thinking of this project as an extension of that book, of Arctic Play, and as an opportunity for readers to reflect on their own senses of place. So I thought about this project as an activity book for Arctic Play, something that would allow for continued engagement with its themes, but also that could stand on its own. So the question became for me at that point, what happens if I layer the ideas that structure Arctic Play onto the passport form? And I'll share some slides from the book as I talk through this next part. Um, these are on the left-hand side, the left image are scans of the original pages of the book, and then on the right are the Riso printed pages, so you can kind of see them side by side. These are not all the pages, just a few that I've selected. So of course, the passport is a document designed to fix, and I would even use the word arrest. It's designed to harden an us-them relationship among bodies moving across imagined borders. And questions like who are you and where are you in the passport become restricted to one's nationality and nation. So with TROPSSAP, which is passport spelled backwards, I wanted to assume land's expansive and complex systems of relations that are not bound by state and that tangle with whatever is in them. The book invites readers to reflect on their integration and entanglement with place. How do they situate themselves in space? What are the things that they notice? And with that also, what are the shifts and fluxes within a space that might change over time? What connects them to place? What suggests belonging? The book is made up of 16 pages plus a cover. As you may have noted, I decided to take up the diagram poems and woven papers of Act 1 of Arctic Play as the aesthetic basis for TROPSSAP, but to leave blanks that a reader could fill in for themselves depending on their own place relations. The process of making the pages was similar to that of Arctic Play, Act 1 of Arctic Play, but I had to keep in mind that I would be binding the book for display and then also scanning and Riso printing it. So for the original version, I decided to use 2 layers of vellum, which is what you're seeing on the left image. Vellum, if you're not familiar with it, has properties similar to tracing paper. And each of these layers, these 2 layers, would be printed in a different color when I Riso printed it, red for one layer and then teal for the other. But also in the original book, for the original pages, the bottom layer would be somewhat visible through the top layer by virtue of the transparency of the vellum. And I also love that each version conveys a different sensibility around the same themes. This is the template for the woven paper um, drawn on vellum. I'll take you through this a little bit. This page is, it actually contains the backgrounds for, or is the template for the backgrounds of 8 pages of the finished book. So it's a 8.5 by 11 sheet of vellum, which I would cut in half and then fold those half sheets to form the pages of the book. So you can see in the corners what I've circled here are the page numbers. So this quarter sheet here would become page 2. The reverse side of it would be page 1. And then this would be the fold. And so this page here are pages 15 and 16. It's my notations for pagination, basically. Um, okay, I then used this template to cut into another piece of vellum. Um, Kind of like using it as a sewing pattern. Um, and into this sheet of vellum, I wove 1/4 inch strips of paper following the pattern. Knowing that Riso printing would require grayscale files, or rather that it works better using grayscale, I used black inked newsprint to create these 1/4 inch strips of paper. Um, so basically this, I took newspaper and just haphazardly brushed ink all over them, and this is them drying here. Um, I made these while I was on residency at Log Haven, which is in Tennessee. The place was like full of bird song, which is a sound that always helps me remember that humans are not the center of things. So here are some close-ups of the weaving in progress, and you can see, I love this kind of like the remnants from the newsprint, sidewalk, other, yeah, just kind of that like haunting remnant of the original papers. This is the second 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper, which would be the basis for another 8 pages. Once I scanned the finished sheets, I would cut this down the middle and then fold along here for a total of 16 pages. On these woven sheets, I pasted printed words that made up the skeleton poem. And then used another sheet of vellum to help create the diagram structure, which is also made from inked newsprint. These are basically the 2 layers that were Riso printed. The sheet on the left is the diagram lines, which would be printed in teal. And then the second layer, the woven papers with the words on them, which would be printed in red. There is also a cover, of course. Here I printed an image of an eagle's head onto vellum as a replacement for the eagle seal on our usual passports, along with the title, TROPSSAP. And then I played with the letters in the United States of America to be in keeping with the book's questions. Can we both untie and then tangle our sense of place? These are my stacks of Riso printed pages, ready for me to collate them. And for the printed version, I bound the pages using my sewing machine and a bright green thread. And for the original pages, this is me making the book from the original pages. So you can see that I cut them down into half sheets. I used a saddle stitch and waxed black thread, making holes for the thread with a screw punch. And this is the bound original. I was not expecting this, but I was so happy that when I bound it, that the layers actually lined up perfectly. I would have been fine if they didn't, but it was just like such a delightful surprise. And here are the books side by side again. And I also included this little insert as a little bit of guidance in the printed books. Um, TROPSSAP is a poetic, this is from the second paragraph. TROPSSAP is a poetic intervention and an activity book. You are invited to take it into places, any places with you, filling in the blank spaces and empty boxes on the pages. Actually, you can write all over them. And I wanted to share a couple of images that were shared with me from a couple of people who iterated on the book. These are pages from Anna Mary Fitzgerald's iteration. I love that she actually used stamps to stamp the passport. So images are standing in for words, and I love like how you would read this. You are maybe you are water, you are waves. And then these photos are from Devin DeMonte's iteration. The photo on the right shows a rubbing. You can kind of make it out here. It says "You Are Here," which is the title for Ada Limon's recent collection of poems about nature. He did a rubbing of the hardcover, and I love that that there's this kind of suggestion again of interconnection between this work and the kind of work that Ada Limon is doing as well. Um, and then on the left in this image, I love that he invited people to provide their signatures. So are you with all of these people? Uh, and it becomes another way of reflecting on entanglement of place and the importance of community within place. And I think that is a good place to end, and I will stop sharing and would so welcome any questions or thoughts.
Ah, that was amazing. Mita, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question, just to kind of kick things off. Um, I guess it's kind of a twofold question. So TROPSSAP is it one of your first artist books?
Um, it's a good question because it's hard to kind of figure out the lines between artist
Yeah,
books and zines and mini comics, you know.
right.
I do kind of like with the comics that I print that are my, that I
Yeah.
self-publish, that I print on my own or reso print. There usually is some kind of handmade element.
Mhm.
Like I had this one book called Hitched, that was the background pages were made of maps, that was printed. And then uh, for each of the cover pieces, I cut out a square, so each had like an original element as part of it. And then I usually also do my own binding as well.
Okay.
So yeah, so if those count as art books, then it's
Yeah.
been like well over 10 years that I've been making them. Um,
Wow.
but this is the first one where it's like the original pages
Mm,
have been bound
yeah.
into their own book.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And your edition of TROPSSAP, how big is your edition?
The Rezo edition is 200.
Wow, okay.
I think is it
Fantastic.
200 or 250? 250. And yeah, it's
Oh,
like passport sized.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's so great. Um, let's see. We had a question about whether or not you had any problems sewing through the pages. So I'm assuming that question means with your sewing machine.
No, that actually was so quick. I did that with a different project called Patterns too. And that one was the pages were made out of old sewing patterns.
Mm,
And so that seemed fitting to kind of use a sewing machine for the binding. But yeah, sometimes you have to kind of watch the tension in the
mm,
thread, and do some trials. But yeah, I think it's like a beautiful way sometimes to create a binding that is fairly, quick,
yeah.
but has a nice effect.
Mm. And in your with your comics work, do you feel like that informs projects like TROPSSAP?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's another, I work so hybridly,
Yeah.
like kind of moving between different forms and different vocabularies that
Mm,
those forms have. And so when I'm making though, I'm always kind of like having in the back of my mind, like, how is this like a comic? And thinking about the relationship between word and image,
yeah.
and how they're kind of corresponding with each other. Like the woven papers for me, it's almost kind of like it's my version of a comics grid,
Mm,
so you're not kind of getting like traditional panels on the page, but like each of those squares that show up, there's like the potential for that to like contain something,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really it's I love that with TROPSSAP you have opened it up to the reading audience to kind of make their own version of it and make it their own and then share that back with you. It's an incredible and interactive part of the project that I love. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Have you heard from anyone else who has sent you photos? Are people like into that or are they kind of like, I don't want to mess up my beautiful passport?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mixed. I think it's mixed. Like I've heard from friends like who have used it with their kids, and to like bond with them and to
Yeah.
think about place. I haven't seen the photos of those yet. And I think that there is a mix that some people, and I get this with most books too, where it's like I don't want to write in the margins. I don't want to mar it. But yeah, I almost with that little insert, I almost said, like feel free to share with me. And it started to feel like, no, I want this to be their own thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what else turns up with it.
Wow. Amazing. I would encourage folks, if you have one last question, we will take them. Otherwise, we might It is 101, so we want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'll take a minute to thank you, Mita, so very much. Because not only is your work fantastic, but it has just been such a treat and a delight to learn more about your process. And I'm really excited to be able to exhibit TROPSSAP here in our gallery as part of the exhibition. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for everyone for coming.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. People are thanking you in the comments, Elizabeth Evans, John Ames, Betha. And so I guess with that as our sort of outro, I will say next month's From the Bench guest will be illustrator and calligrapher Katie Levins. So, keep an eye on our website and our newsletter. We'll be announcing the date for that. And thanks to everyone again for joining us on your lunch break. And also, Mita, thank you so much. It really has been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.